I haven't heard from Owen in 24 hours.
Your husband is not who you think he is.
I wanted to talk to you about the finale and that moment when Owen returns after all these years. What does that moment mean to her there and then? And what does it mean for their future if they have any or don't have any?
Oh man, you just launched into the biggest question of the whole thing. Obviously it's a spoiler, so we can't talk about it, The moment in the finale, I so applaud Hannah for keeping it together and for not punching him and grabbing him and asking him the millions of questions she must have and berating him for putting her in the position that she was in. She has to have done so much work to have found peace, to be able to handle that moment. But also, gosh, it must have been like an oasis for her in the middle of a desert to just feel him next to her for a moment.
Yeah, it definitely felt very loaded in that moment between the two of them. What was it like working with Nikolaj to create that intense relationship that becomes the foundation for her trust in him?
Nikolaj was I'm so glad you asked about him. He's so wonderful. He's so game. We started with intimacy training, and intimacy training can be quite awkward, but the moment we did not know each other at all. We had never spoken by Zoom. And the moment we started and I could feel him just relax into it and we both started laughing, we were standing this close with our eyes closed and he started laughing and I just thought, okay, we're going to be fine. And we really were. He's just become very dear to me. He's a wonderful, wonderful actor and man.
So obviously we don't get a lot of your character on screen. What was something that was very important that you wanted to get across about your character to the audience in that short amount of time?
Well, I think that it's obviously the core of this is a story about, in a way, a love story between this stepmother and her daughter, or stepdaughter, and how they find each other throughout this mystery thriller. For me, it was just interesting that, for me as an actor, it was important that you believe the love between, Owen and Hannah. And then, of course, because you're going to question that throughout the show. You will question everything about this guy, rightly so. Because the hope is, for me, at the end, that even though there are so many twists and turns in terms of who this guy is, that there's still the core. That the core is still there, and you recognize that.
And you get the sense of that anyway, the relationship and how aids the trust that she has in him.
Yeah, but also what I liked when I read the script was also that, because I do recognize that, I don't know, I think we all have that. I can't say we all. I definitely have had those moments in my life where, you trust someone, you love someone, you really believe, and then there's just part of you in the back going, what if this is not real? What if it's just something they're pretending? What if because you never know. Of course you should, but there's always those little devils. And then here in this show, of course, all those things come, hitting this Hannah, Jennifer's character, right in the face, just saying, listen, you are wrong to trust this guy, and he's a liar. And can you lie and still be honest?
How does it feel to see your work transition from novel to screen? And what was it like? Do you feel like it's an extension of that world, or do you think like it's its own separate entity?
I actually feel a little bit of both. So it feels like an extension to me in that I feel like it was a really faithful and careful adaptation of the book, and it has a lot of the same themes. We talk a lot about how it's a thriller rooted in hope, and I think that really carries over. And yet at the same time, it feels like its own thing, because I could never have imagined a cast of talented actors and directors who really just brought things and colors and textures to the show in a way that I couldn't have done on my own. So I just feel incredibly grateful for that.
Yeah. And Josh, you've worked on some really successful projects in the past, Spotlight, The Post. Was there anything that you took from those learnings that you translated over to the last thing you told us?
I mean everything. I mean, I've been very fortunate to work with wonderful, wonderful directors, and and to me, what I love is collaboration, and I think all the best film and TV is terrific collaboration, and so in general, taking those skills and working with the writer's room and working with Laura to craft the scripts, and then working with our wonderful directors. We had Livy Newman and Denise Gomes-Ergovan and Daisy Mayer and Lila Neugebauer, all of whom brought incredible talent to what they were doing, and really trying to make everybody just pull in the same direction. I will give you one specific thing. Most recently, I've been working with Bradley Cooper for the last 4 years on this show about Leonard Bernstein, movie about Leonard Bernstein, which I'm really excited about. And Bradley has this thing, he loves to read the scripts aloud. And so the two of us would be sitting there reading the scripts back and forth, and we did that a ton. And I'd never done that before, and I thought, wow, this is fantastic, because you can hear the scripts in a different way. And so at the very outset, we invited Jen to come sit in our backyard and read the scripts with us. And when you get Jen Garner, you're going to get a great actor, but you don't know you're going to get a great collaborator and a great leader. And Jen was more than game, and she came to the backyard and she read through every single script, with us. And then she did it again with, and Gary Rice and some other members of the cast. And it enabled us to really tweak the scripts, refine them, get them better and better before we even went to shoot. And it also, I think, allowed for a dialogue between Jen and us about the character, and allowed her to really sink into the character. And frankly, I think the results speak for themselves. I think it's career best work from her, in a pretty stellar career. So I think that's saying something.
Obviously, Hannah has massive decisions to make in short amount of time. How does she know and trust that she's making the right decision, the one that Owen actually wants her to make? Because
it's impossible. It's impossible for Hannah to really know what she is supposed to do. He leaves her 2 words: protect her. And she ends up doing just that. Physically, emotionally, she protects the integral part of who Bailey is. She protects her identity. And in doing that, she has to sacrifice again and again and again. And I think that it's impossible for her to know. She's just following some truly primal instinct that she didn't know she has, that is really motherhood.
And how does Hannah grow in that journey? I have my own feelings and thoughts, but how do you feel that she...
I'm dying to know what you think, Janet. But she goes from really being at odds with this stepdaughter. Hannah's never had a mother. She doesn't know how to mother. Bailey didn't have a mother. She doesn't want a mother. And they are completely at odds at the beginning of the story. And this is really about a love story between these 2 women as they are thrust together, their lives fall apart, and they have only each other to lean on, like it or not. And they have to work as a team, as difficult as it may be, until they build their trust and grow into a really deep friendship.
I felt like it was very healing for them both, coming from a place where they both didn't have a mother. So I found that really interesting. What was it like kind of working through those emotions to kind of portray them on screen?
What was hard for Ngowri and me is that she's quite close to her mom and I'm quite close to my teenagers. And so just stripping away my maternal instincts and stripping away the energy that I bring to a relationship with a young person, which is like, hi, and getting to a really still place was actually, that was some more work for me than you might realize.
Well, you pulled it off.
Thank you.
What was kind of like the most rewarding thing about working on this show?
Oh, the entire, it was one of the most fulfilling collaborations I've ever been part of. Laura Dave, the author of the book, Josh Singer, our showrunner and Oscar award-winning screenwriter, the two of them together just really invited me into their process early on. I had a lot of time to prep, and I used it all. I used it with my acting coach. I worked with a vocal coach so that I could lower the register of my voice. I turned wood many hours a week. I sat with Josh and Laura, and we read through the script, and we tore it apart and talked about it and looked at the book, and then went back and did it again for hours every week. And the luxury of that, I just felt like informed the entire production.
So it's been many years since you've played Jamie Lannister, but obviously you're still very heavily associated with that character. Is it nice to kind of show people a different range with this character, Owen?
Yeah. I mean, I don't, I've never thought of it like that. I absolutely understand what you're saying, like, because Game of Thrones was at the time the biggest show on the planet. So of course that character filled so much. But for me, it was, I was doing 3 movies a year while I was doing that show. So those characters were just as felt, were filling me as much as he did. But I wanted to do this because I just thought this was a great story, and I thought, wow, this is interesting and a nice challenge. And I wanted to work with Laura and Josh Singer is such a fantastic writer, of course, and of course Jennifer Nangari. So it's not about showing off other parts of skill sets or whatever that is. It's more about it's a really cool project to be part of.
Why do you think your character risks it all to come back in the end?
No, I think that, I mean, I think the core of this is kind of like, he says, I'll do anything for my daughter. He's always there. And then, of course, the gratitude he feels towards Hannah, the love of his life in a way, that she has managed to do, to take care of his daughter, to protect her. So that she could become, as we see in the final parts of the show, you see, oh, she's alive, she's vibrant, she's in love. It's, I think that he had to come back and just let her know that he was thankful. Or maybe he's just a psychopath. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's just like, he almost got over him, and then he just has to come back like.
Is there any additional information in the book that would perhaps lend itself to a season 2?
It's possible. It's so funny. It took me about 10 years to write this book. I kept picking it up and putting it down, and I just...
You threw it away at some point.
I literally threw it in the trash.
You wrote 2 other books, which came out.
Dramatic. And it wasn't until I had my child in 2016 that I realized this was the primal story of someone becoming a parent. And all the ways that journey looks different for all of us. And I wanted it to be an ode to the different ways that journey looks for all of us, and an ode to found family. And so in some ways I feel as though there's more story to tell. And in other ways I feel like this is meant to be a limited series. We planned it as a limited series. And I hope for people that really connected to the book, and for people that are coming to it fresh, it feels complete unto itself.
Yeah, we sold it as a limited. We always imagine it as a limited. And what I love is, is that thing that Laura found when she picked the book up again, which is that you think it's a love story about Hannah and Owen, and it's really about Hannah and Bailey moving closer and closer together. And that's what I think is the magic here. And so in some ways that story is complete. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
I'll ask a question about Hannah and Bailey, but before I do, I have to know the very last scene when when Owen returns,
yes,
and he's talking to Hannah. What does he actually say to her? Because I've around that thing about.
That's amazing. He says the could have been boys still love you, which is a reference to.
So interestingly, when Laura first wrote the book, it was called The Could Have Been Boys.
Yeah.
And it was, and I always loved that title. In the flashback in Malibu in episode 2, they talk about the could have been boys, and they're the boys that could have been. And what you don't have the benefit, which our viewers will, is in the recap, we will recap that section, so you will be reminded that he talks about the Goodman boys, the ones who came before, and
the ones that are lost to you.
The ones that are lost to you. And so, you know, he basically comes back and says the Goodman boys still love you. So that's what it is.
We also didn't have subtitles, so I kept going back.
we have to make sure that subtitle is clear. That's a really
true.
good point.
But we're excited that you got to the end. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Definitely. Like I said, I wanted to ask about Hannah and Bailey's relationship, and it evolves so much over the progress of the whole series. How does it help shape them, and who do they become in the end?
You know, this is really a story about someone who never had a mother herself, trying to mother someone who's also never had a mother herself. And I love that, you know, I'm really interested and always have been in triangulation. You know, the way that instead of sort of intimacy, sometimes we create triangles in our lives. And a triangle that often gets created for people is a triangle between a husband and his new wife and the stepdaughter/daughter. And the way I've seen it depicted historically is there's often competition between the two women for the father/husband's love. And I wanted to do it differently. I wanted to suggest that they are not in competition. And in fact, the one thing that they are sure of is that this man loves both of them. And the distance that they have to cross for each other isn't about two women competing. It's about two women understanding each other. And so that is really what their journey was, toward that understanding that they could count on each other.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Are there any scenes or any characters that you didn't get to include that you really wished you did?
Oh, that's a really interesting question.
I
will say the character. So when we first started writing the pilot, the first thing I wrote, which Harris Danow later rewrote in a much better fashion, was I wrote young Hannah with her grandfather.
So we
because I always wanted to understand what that relationship had been, see that guy, and get a sense of how that backstory had such a profound effect on Hannah. And so I love that we got to do that in episode 104. I will say the other thing is, so there's a chapter in the book called The Good Lawyer. And it's a chapter which tells Nicholas's backstory. And what I love about that chapter is it really gives you context, you know, because there are really one of the lovely things about the book is there's no strict bad guys or strict good guys, right? And even Nicholas is not just a bad guy, right? It's complicated. And that's what Laura gets across in that. And so one of the things I was really proud of in episode 6 is we figured out a way with the flashback to Ethan and Nicholas to introduce that character in a way that's gray as opposed to black and white, right? Which I think is key so that you understand him when you get to episode 107. And thank God we got David Morse, who's just wonderful, right? And really creates a full character in those 2 episodes that we can really get to know, I think, and believe that he makes the decision he does in the same way that we believe that, you know, Hannah makes the decision she does.